The bell over the glass-pane door gave a soft jingle, barely rising above the quiet hum of conversation and the low hiss of the espresso machine. Most patrons didn't lift their heads here at Brewgrain Café, nestled on King Street in the heart of Charleston, South Carolina. A gentle rhythm governed the mornings. Oat milk lattes and lavender scones were favored. Smiles were polite but brief. Stories were seldom shared aloud. But Zoe Martinez looked up. A slender 23-year-old, her deep brown eyes were trained by habit to scan the room with each new arrival. She noticed the man the moment he entered. His gait was careful, deliberate, each step accompanied by the soft clink of coins in his pocket. His skin was a deep mahogany traced with the fine lines of age, and a life well lived or perhaps endured. He wore a faded denim vest, threadbare in places, draped over a plain black t-shirt. On the back, nearly worn through, was a patch silver riders. Beneath it, in faint stitching, in memory of all we carried home. His boots were dusty, his jeans patched. He carried history, not loudly but unmistakably. Zoe exhaled, fingers tightening on the polished counter. She had seen him before every Thursday, same time, always alone. Without fail, he would settle into table 9, a small round table with the clearest view of the American flag, mounted proudly across the street on the courthouse lawn. That flag, she had seen him look at it before, eyes distant, unmoving, as though tracing memories in its folds. Today was no different. The man eased himself into his seat, leaning his cane against the side of the table. The cane, a simple dark wood, polished, smooth from use, bore a small brass inlay, a single star. He set down $3.75, counted carefully from the coins in his pocket. Then he looked toward the counter. Zoe already knew the order. Cherry pie, a single slice. Black coffee, hot, no sugar. She prepared it with practiced grace, placing the slice on a ceramic plate, not the usual disposable dish, a small kindness. As she approached his table, she noticed his eyes briefly meet hers, soft brown, but weighted by decades. "Good morning, Mr. Rhodess," she said gently. He nodded once. "Thank you, young lady." His voice was low-textured, like worn leather. The cafe settled into its familiar hum. Fingers tapped softly on keyboards. Ceramic cups clinked against saucers. A playlist of mellow acoustic tunes drifted through the air. Charleston's humidity lingered outside, 82 degrees already, even at 10:30 a.m. But inside, cool air hummed from overhead vents. Then the spell broke. The door burst open with a loud jangle. A group of 5 teenagers stormed in, their crisp navy blazers and striped ties marking them as students from St. Anthony's Academy, an exclusive private school 2 blocks down. Laughter bubbled from them like carbonated soda, loud, careless, without a hint of self-awareness. Zoe watched warily from behind the counter as they crowded into a corner booth. The tallest boy, blonde hair gelled high, noticed Mr. Rhodess almost immediately. "Is that guy seriously wearing a biker vest?" he snorted, voice carrying across the room. "What is this, 1975? Another chimed in, barely lowering his voice. "Probably thinks he's still fighting Nam. Should have brought a walker instead of that attitude." Laughter followed, sharp, jagged. Zoe froze mid-wipe at the counter. At table 9, Mr. Rhodess stirred his coffee slowly. His gaze remained fixed on the flag outside. Shoulders, however, sank ever so slightly, as though an old familiar weight had pressed down once again. Zoe's stomach tightened. She glanced at Brad Kinley, the cafe's owner, visible through the office window. He was texting, oblivious. The teens weren't done. One boy exaggerated a limp as he dragged his feet past table 9, drawing hoots from his friends. Another held up his phone, angling it toward Mr. Rhodess. Posting this, he whispered, #lost in the war. The cruel gleam of phone screens captured what respect should have preserved. Zoe's heart pounded. She knew the cafe wasn't the place for confrontations, but her hands clenched involuntarily. At the counter, she inhaled deeply, wiped her palms against her apron, and stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said, voice clear but steady. "You'll need to keep your voices down." The group turned as one. Smirks, raised eyebrows. "You serious?" asked the tall one. "We're just talking." "You're harassing a customer," Zoe replied, voice unwavering. "If you can't be respectful, you'll need to leave." Mock gasps echoed around the booth. "Cashier Karen's having a moment," one girl sneered. The boy in the center leaned back smugly. "Do you even know who my dad is?" Zoe crossed her arms. Her voice dropped, steady and firm. "Do you know who he is?" she asked, nodding toward Mr. Rhodes. A beat of silence. "Just some crusty biker," one muttered. "Probably homeless." Zoey exhaled slowly. "That crusty biker wears a silver rider's patch. That's not decoration, it's earned. You don't have to like it. But in here, you will respect it." The cafe grew still. For the first time, even the teenagers seemed unsure. From the office, Brad appeared exasperated. "What's going on? They were mocking a veteran." "I asked them to stop," Zoey said. Brad's jaw tightened. "They're paying customers." "You can't pick fights with kids." "I didn't," she replied calmly. "I asked them to act like decent human beings." "Apologize to them," Brad ordered. Zoey stood her ground. "No, I won't." Brad stepped closer. "Then you're done here. Clock out." The words struck like ice. Silence filled the cafe. "Mr. Rose began to rise slowly as if to speak, but Brad cut him off with a dismissive wave. "This doesn't concern you, sir." Zoey walked to the register, removed her apron with trembling fingers, and laid it down neatly. Then she turned to Mr. Rhodes. "Thank you for your service," she said softly. He looked up, eyes brimming with old battles seen and unseen. "And thank you for remembering." As Zoey pushed through the door into the summer heat, her chest ached not with fear, but with something deeper, the weight of injustice. Neither she nor Mr. Rhodes noticed the teenager in the corner still filming. The internet would soon echo with laughter, but it would remember the silence. Outside the cafe, the mid-morning sun pressed down on Charleston's brick sidewalks, casting long shadows beneath wrought iron balconies and fluttering flags. Zoe's footsteps echoed faintly as she walked away from Brew Grain Cafe, her apron folded beneath one arm. The warmth in the air did little to ease the chill creeping through her chest. Injustice had a cold weight, one she carried now heavier with each step. She hadn't looked back, not once. But inside she could still hear the cruel laughter, still see the old man's quiet dignity at table 9 crumbling beneath sneers. Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate. "Everything okay?" she typed back quickly. "Coming home early. I'll explain later." No more words. Her throat tightened. Tears threatened, but stubborn pride held them back for now. Behind her inside the cafe, the world had already begun to shift. Mr. Calvin Rhodes remained seated, fingers resting lightly on the edge of his untouched slice of cherry pie. His coffee had cooled. Around him, conversation resumed, a little forced, a little too loud, as if trying to erase what had happened. Brad Kinley leaned smugly against the espresso machine, thumbing a message into his phone. Handled it. Girl thought she was Rosa Parks. The teenagers returned to their lattes and phones, emboldened by their apparent victory. But not everyone had resumed normal life. At a corner table near the window, Dana Reed sat frozen. A retired librarian with a sharp memory for names, she could not shake the one Zoey had spoken before leaving. Calvin Rhodess. It teased the edges of her mind, a name once read, once honored. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone. She opened her browser and typed carefully, "Calvin Rhodess, Vietnam vet." A single tap. A beat of silence. Then headlines, grainy photos, tributes. Her breath caught. Silver Star recipient. Rescued 14 Marines under fire. Founder of Silver Riders Veteran Support Group. "Oh my God," she whispered aloud. Across the room, a young man in military reserve gear sat hunched over a laptop. Donna leaned toward him, voice shaking. "Excuse me, did you hear that man's name?" He pulled out an earbud. "Rhodes, Calvin Rhodes." She nodded. His face hardened. "That's not just any vet. That man's a legend." At table 9, Calvin slowly reached for his cane, pushing himself upright. His bones ached, but not from age, from the burden of so many silent moments like this one. He glanced at the counter where Brad laughed with one of the teens, then at the group still posting their video. He pulled a small flip phone from his pocket, simple, battered, trusted. Scrolling carefully with thick fingers, he pressed a single button and brought it to his ear. "Yeah," he said softly. It happened again. No anger in his voice, no demand, just a weary truth. Then he gave the address and closed the phone. The room's quiet hum masked the storm already gathering. At the same moment, Dana tapped her screen, her heart pounding. Posts were already surfacing. A video of Zoey being fired. Mr. Rhodes hunched at his table. Captions mocking him when Grandpa thinks he's still in the war. Lost in the 70s. Biker boomer. But within minutes, comments flooded in. Take this down. You just disrespected a hero. That's Calvin Rhodes's. Saved my uncle's life. Show some damn respect. You have no idea who you just laughed at. The teen who had posted the clip blinked at his screen. Dude, what the hell, people are blowing up my post? His friend frowned. Man, this guy's legit, like medals and stuff. Serious. Their laughter thinned. Dana stood unable to sit still. She approached the counter where Brad was still smirking. She held out her phone screen lit with Calvin's story. That man you humiliated? This is him. Brad barely glanced. Okay, and Dana's voice steadied. You don't get it, do you? You didn't just disrespect a man. You disrespected an entire generation. Brad scoffed. Lady, I run a business, not a history museum. But outside 15 miles beyond Charleston's quiet streets, engines began to stir. Chrome and leather gleamed beneath morning light. The call had reached the Silver Riders. Riders tightened vests, zipped worn jackets. Tires rolled onto asphalt. What was coming wasn't vengeance. It was remembrance. Calvin had never asked for a parade, never wanted attention, but sometimes silence demanded an answer. Back at the cafe, Zoey sat on the curb 2 blocks away, phone silent in her lap. She hadn't gone home. Couldn't. Not yet. She traced the words Mr. Rhodes had spoken. Thank you for remembering. Simple words, but they had lit something fierce within her. At that very moment across Charleston, phones buzzed again. A respected veteran shamed. A young woman fired for standing tall. The posts spread like fire through the local veteran network, through military circles, through family groups who remembered the name Calvin Rhodes. And then beyond Charleston through the National Silver Riders Network, a brotherhood bound not by age or uniform, but by shared scars and silent loyalty. By noon, engines thundered onto Highway 17. Riders spanned generations, Vietnam vets with silver beards, Iraq and Afghanistan vets with haunted eyes, widows and children who carried patches in honor of the fallen. They rode for dignity, for memory, for Calvin. Back in the cafe, Brad remained oblivious. The teens grew quieter, checking their phones anxiously as angry messages poured in. Near the window, Dana whispered to the young man in uniform, her voice low but firm. They're coming. He nodded once. Good. At table 9, Calvin returned, settling back into his seat with slow, deliberate grace. His coffee remained cold, but the flag outside still waved. He watched it a quiet sentinel. The cafe's hum resumed, but beneath it ran another current in awareness and unease. No one saw the growing line of headlights on the horizon, but soon they would. The first rumble came low, distant so faint that most inside Brewgrain Cafe didn't notice. But Dana Reed heard it. Seated near the window, fingers still trembling over her phone, she paused mid-sip of her now cold tea. Her gaze flicked toward the street. Out of habit, she checked the sky. No clouds, no sign of a storm. Yet the sound grew louder, steadier. Inside conversation thinned to a nervous hum. The teens, still hunched at their booth, stared at their phones. The angry comments kept coming, sharp words typed by strangers who somehow seemed to know exactly who they had mocked. Brad Kinley remained behind the counter, utterly unaware. He had just sent another smug message, crisis over. Back to business, but business would not go on as usual. Another rumble, this time stronger. Windows faintly vibrated. Cups clinked against saucers. A few heads lifted. A barista paused, mid-steam, eyes narrowing. What the hell is that? One of the teens asked, voice quieter now. Outside the street beyond the cafe's shaded patio was no longer still. First came the headlights, dozens glowing in the morning light. Then the chrome gleaming like polished armor. Motorcycles, not a few, not even a crowd. A formation, disciplined, unified, deliberate. At the front, a tall woman rode with steady control. Her silver-streaked hair trailed beneath a leather cap. Her vest bore a simple badge above rows of campaign patches. President Silver Riders. Behind her, row upon row of riders, followed veterans, first responders, widows, children of the fallen. Each vest marked by the same emblem, a silver wheel encircled by wings. The Silver Riders had come. The low growl of engines now filled King Street. Pedestrians stopped, phones lifted. Traffic slowed to a crawl. Inside the cafe, patrons rose, drifting toward the windows. Conversation ceased entirely. The teenagers sat frozen. Is this for him? One whispered voice cracking. At table 9, Mr. Calvin Rhodes remained seated unmoving. His gaze stayed fixed on the flag across the street, his slice of pie untouched, his coffee cold. He had not called them in anger. He had not summoned revenge, only respect. But sometimes when silence is wounded, respect rolls in like thunder. The engines idled to a deep, resonant hum. Then one by one, the riders removed their helmets, men and women of all ages, their faces marked by stories no Instagram post could tell. The front door of Brew Grain swung open with deliberate grace. The woman Roberta Red Langston stepped inside. A hush swept the room. Brad, leaning against the register, straightened. His cocky smile faltered. Roberta's voice was calm, steady, cutting through the silence. I'm looking for the man who fired a young woman for standing up to punks. Her gaze locked on Brad. He cleared his throat. Ma'am, I don't know what this is about, but I run a business. You can't just... No, she interrupted, voice firm. You ran a business. She unfolded a sheet of paper and placed it on the counter. The owner of this building has been trying to sell it for 2 years. This morning they accepted our cash offer. As of 30 minutes ago, this property belongs to us. Brad blinked. What? That's impossible. You heard me, she said. You work for no one now. Gas rippled through the cafe. Behind her, more riders entered, helmets in hand. Veterans with silver stars pinned to their jackets. Widows with patches sewn in memory of fallen loved ones. Younger veterans with haunted eyes and quiet resolve. At the back of the crowd, unnoticed until now, Zoey stood just inside the door. She hadn't gone home. She had waited sitting on the curb, watching it all unfold. Roberta spotted her. You, she called softly. Zoey Martinez. Zoey nodded hesitantly. Yes, ma'am. Red smiled, a smile forged in steel and grace. You stood for our brother when no one else did. That kind of courage earns a place. She turned back to the cafe. As our first official act, we are rehiring Zoey as manager. Cheers erupted outside. Inside, the air seemed to lighten, years of unseen judgment finally lifting. Brad stammered, voice hollow. You can't do this. Roberta faced him fully. We already have. Clean out your things. You've served enough bitterness for one lifetime. The baristas exchanged wide-eyed glances. Emma, the youngest, stepped forward timidly. Is this really happening? Red placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Yes, sweetheart. From now on, this place will be what it was always meant to be, a safe table for everyone. At that moment, the front door creaked once more. Mr. Calvin Rhodes rose from table 9. Slowly, with measured steps, he walked to the center of the cafe. Silence fell again, reverent, deep. Patrons rose. Some placed hands over hearts. Others bowed heads. Veterans among them snapped silent salutes. Red approached him with a small, polished wooden box. She opened it to reveal a forged silver medallion, 2 hands lifting a fallen comrade ringed by the words, "For valor shown in silence." She knelt not in pity but in profound respect and pinned it beneath his service medals. You never asked for a thing, she said softly. But today we give you this, not for what you did in war, but for what you taught us here. Calvin's lips pressed together, eyes glistening. He stood taller, straightened his shoulders. From behind the counter, one of the teenagers' pale voice shaking rose. Mr. Rhodes, we didn't know who you were. We didn't mean. Calvin raised a hand, gently stopping him. His voice, rough but kind, carried across the room. Son, the worst thing you did wasn't mocking me. It was assuming I mattered less because I was quiet, because I was old, because I wore dust instead of polish. The boy swallowed hard. His friends stared at the floor. Calvin continued. Freedom was earned with blood. Mocking it with noise only diminishes your own voice. Then he turned his gaze, meeting Zoey's. He nodded once, a gesture that spoke volumes. Because sometimes the bravest thing a man can do isn't surviving war. It's surviving silence with grace and teaching others to listen. Outside, the Silver Riders waited not for spectacle, not for war, but to escort their brother home with honor. The sun rose softly over Charleston a week later, its golden light slanting across the brick streets and wrought iron balconies of King Street. Brew Grain Café opened its doors quietly that morning. No press, no announcements. Just the usual hum of a new day. Baristas prepping for the first rush, the scent of freshly brewed coffee, mingling with warm cinnamon from the ovens. But something was different. Inside the cafe had changed not in appearance, but in spirit. Conversations were softer, kinder. Strangers nodded to one another. The air held a subtle reverence, like a place that had witnessed something sacred and would not forget. At the center of this transformation stood Table 9. The round wooden table remained beneath the wide window, with its cherished view of the American flag across the street. But no chairs surrounded it now. No menus lay upon it. Instead, a simple bronze plaque was affixed to the surface, reserved for those we overlook. In honor of Calvin Rhodess, hero in silence, friend in plain sight. Below it, a small American flag stood in a brass holder, its fabric catching the morning light. Zoey Martinez moved behind the counter, not as a cashier this time, but as the cafe's new manager. A modest silver name tag gleamed against her black blouse, Zoey, honor above all. She had resisted at first. "I'm just a student," she'd told Roberta Langston days before. "You're not just anything," Red had replied. "You're exactly the kind of person this world needs more of." And so Zoey stood here now, steady, a quiet force in the place she once feared leaving behind. That morning, familiar faces began to fill the space. Dana Reed arrived early, taking her usual window seat. The young reservist who had first spoken Calvin's name aloud brought two friends from his unit. Emma the barista wore a tiny Silver Riders patch on her apron, a gift from one of the veterans. Outside, the street buzzed softly. Motorcycles lined the curbs, some in small clusters, others standing alone, their chrome gleaming beneath the rising sun. The Silver Riders had not left after that fateful day. They came now and again, not in spectacle, but in quiet remembrance. Today was no different. Shortly after opening, a group of 4 riders entered. They ordered coffee and pie, the same order Mr. Rhodes had favored. They spoke little, their presence filling the space with unspoken meaning. Zoey watched them with quiet gratitude. Her gaze flicked to Table 9, where fresh flowers had been placed that morning by one of the older riders. By mid-morning, another shift unfolded. The door opened and a group of teenagers stepped inside, hesitant, solemn. The same boys who had mocked Calvin that day. Their faces were pale but determined. No phones out, no snickering, just lowered eyes and unsteady breaths. Zoey noticed instantly. Her heart tensed, but she held her place waiting. The boys approached Table 9 as if approaching an altar. One carried a folded letter, another a worn military patch, and a third a dog tag dangling from a silver chain. They laid their offerings gently at the edge of the table. No word spoken. Then the tallest boy, the one who had first laughed so cruelly, looked toward Zoey. His voice cracked as he spoke. "We're sorry," he whispered. "We didn't know. We didn't understand." Zoey swallowed. Tears threatened, but she steadied herself. "Thank you," she said softly, "for coming back." No more needed to be said. The boys left quietly, heads bowed. The room remained hushed, as if the very walls had heard the apology. Outside, the motorcycles still gleamed beneath the sun. More riders arrived throughout the morning, not in fanfare, but in solidarity. They ordered coffee, greeted Zoey with gentle nods, and took their seats with reverence. At noon, Red Langston herself entered. Her silver hair shone beneath her leather cap. She approached Table 9, her gaze warm. "Mind if I sit for a moment?" she asked Zoey. Zoey smiled. "Please." Red sat, hands folded on the table's edge. She looked out at the flag, eyes distant. "He taught us all something," she said softly. "You, me, everyone in this room." Zoey nodded. "I think he taught us to see." Red smiled, and to listen. For a long moment they sat together in silence, one earned through hardship and restored through grace. As the afternoon light deepened, the café remained full. Not loud, not busy, but full in the way that matters most. Veterans stopped by, one after another. Some brought children, pointing softly to Table 9 as they whispered stories. Locals paused to read the plaque. Some placed hands to hearts, others left small tokens, a single rose, a folded flag pin, a handwritten note. And through it all, Zoe watched, heart swelling not with pride, but with deep, humble gratitude. Because Calvin Rhodes had never asked for a stage, never sought applause, but by living quietly with steadfast honor, he had transformed this place forever. And now the community carried that legacy forward. Even as evening approached and the cafe's lights glowed warm against twilight, Table 9 remained untouched, an enduring symbol, not just of one man's story, but of the power of respect, of noticing those too often unseen. Zoe glanced toward the plaque once more, her fingers brushing the counter. "Thank you," she whispered. Outside engines rumbled faintly as a small group of riders departed into the deepening dusk. No parade, no announcement. Just a quiet ride in honor of a brother. And inside Brewgrain Cafe, beneath soft light and gentle voices, the legacy of Calvin Rhodess lived on in every glance toward Table 9, in every choice to see, and in every moment when silence was met with respect.